Welcome to the channel. We're excited to explore ideas that shaped Western civilization and the world in this series. Our goal is a family-friendly vibe, though sensitive topics might pop up. As such, viewer discretion is advised. When guest speakers join us, we'll ask them to keep in line with our standards, but we can't promise that. Our aim is to break down concepts clearly and concisely without oversimplifying, and focus on discussion of ideas, not necessarily the promotion of them. Satire, nuance, and devil's advocate moments might arise, so context matters. The channel and its team don't officially back any views that are discussed. We'll adapt as we go, and we'd love your civil, constructive input. Check descriptions and comments for info. Our goal, to be open-minded, evolving, and exploratory. Thrilled to have you here.
Hello, and welcome back to our read-along series. Today we're continuing more of Plato 2, the Republic. And last time we finished off with discussing the qualities that are needed for a good, basically a police officer or statesman, protector of the peace, and that also dogs are philosophers. So I guess we'll pick up on that topic. And Bryce, would you like to start us off, or should I?
Sure, I can. It goes on to say, then I have found the desired natures, and now that we have found them, how are they to be reared and educated? Is not this inquiry, which may be expected to throw light on the greater inquiry, which is our final end, how do justice and injustice grow up in states? For we do not want either to omit what is to the point, or to draw out the argument to an inconvenient length. Adeimantus thought that the inquiry would be of great service to us. Then I said, my dear friend, the task must not be given up, if somewhat long. Certainly not. Come then, and let us pass a leisure hour in storytelling, and our story shall be the education of our heroes, by all means. And what then shall be their education? Can we find a better than the traditional sort? And has this two divisions, gymnastics for the body and music for the soul? True. Shall we begin education with music and go on to gymnastic afterwards? By all means. And what then? And And when you speak of music, do you include literature or not? I do. And literature may be either true or false? Yes. On this point, I wonder if the translator is translating this section, or this, I guess these sentences on whether literature is true or false. I wonder if that's a different way of saying like fiction and nonfiction. I'd like to have a conversation for YouTube in the future on the merits of fiction and nonfiction, but I guess at this point I don't know if exactly true and false is implying, or is what the translator is meaning to use in place of nonfiction and fiction. But
yeah, I think it is nonfiction and fiction.
But yeah, at any rate, I'd like to eventually have some sort of conversation on the merits of both. I'll continue. And the young should be trained in both kinds, and we begin with the false. I do not understand your meaning, he said. You know, I said that we begin by telling children stories which, though not wholly destitute of truth, are in the main fictitious, and these stories are told them when they're not of an age to learn gymnastics. Very true. That was my meaning when I said that we must teach music before gymnastics. Quite right, he said. You know, that is the beginning. I am so sorry. You also know that the beginning is the most important part of any work, especially in the case of a young and tender thing, for that is the time at which the character is being formed, and the desired impression is more readily taken. Quite true. And shall we carelessly allow children to hear any casual tales, which may be devised by casual persons, and to receive in their minds ideas for the most part the very opposite of those which we should wish them to have when they grow up, we cannot. Then the first thing will be to establish a censorship of the writers of fiction, and let the censors receive any tale of fiction which is good, and reject the bad. And we will desire mothers and nurses to tell the children the authorized ones only. Let them fashion their mind with such tales even more fondly than they mold the body with their hands. But most of these of the but most of those which are now in use must be discarded. Of what tales are you speaking? He said. You may find a model of the lesser in the greater, I said, for they are necessarily of the same type, and there is the same spirit in both of them. Very likely, he replied, but I do not as of yet know what you would term the greater. Those, I said, which are narrated by Homer and Hesiod, and the rest of the poets, who have ever been the great storytellers of mankind. But which storytellers do you mean, he said, and what fault do you find with them? A fault which is most serious, I said, the fault of telling a lie, and what is more, a bad lie. But when is the fault committed? Whenever the erroneous representation is made of the nature of gods and heroes, as when the painter paints a portrait not having the shadow of a likeness of the original. Yes, he said, that sort of thing is certainly very blamable. But what are the stories which you mean? First of all, I said, there was that greatest of all lies in high places, which the poet told about Uranus, and which was a bad lie too. I mean that Hesiod says that Uranus did, and how Cronus retaliated on him. The doings of Cronus, and the sufferings which, in turn, his son inflicted upon him, even if they were true, ought certainly not to be lightly told to young and thoughtless persons. If possible, they had better be buried in silence. But if there is an absolute necessity of their mention, a chosen few might hear them in a mystery, and they should sacrifice not common Eleusinian pig, but some huge and unprocurable victim. And then the number of the hearers will be very few indeed.
Hmm. Hmm.
I know, Caleb, you're an aspiring author. So what does this spur in your mind from like a authorial or point of view or perspective?
Oh, I don't know. I guess I like that he's, suggesting a sort of age-based censorship, because not everything is, appropriate for children. Then he says that it's the telling of a lie. I'm not familiar with this story that they're referring to, but then it doesn't seem like it's the lie that is really the problem, as much as maybe either fear of the children emulating something that happened in the story, or yeah, I don't know. I'm still trying to process this last part, especially. Yeah, I think this would be a case when there would definitely be a big advantage to having more cultural knowledge, both of maybe the story and of maybe something about this sacrificing a pig and maybe how they told stories. Like a chosen few might hear the stories in a mystery. Like, does that mean like indirectly, like with metaphor or something? Or is that like a certain way of presenting a story that they would say is in a mystery? So I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of questions here, for me at least. I'm not sure what he's talking about. Yeah. I do think the topic also of like learning from stories is a big and interesting topic. Like I've heard authors, people would ask authors like, "Oh, did you purposefully put this message or this symbolism or theme in your story?" And a couple notable authors have expressed this sentiment, which I agree with, which is, in essence, any really good story is going to have those themes and those elements and symbolism because those are just naturally part of good stories. You can't have a story with depth without, a theme sneaking in, or at least some significant topics sneaking in, or, some inadvertent symbolism or something, because, the things that are significant to us, have symbolic implications. Like it's just kind of natural. Like, you can purposely put it in or not, but if you're making a good story, you know, deeper things like that are going to sneak in. So you might as well, be purposeful about them, if you want to make your story say what you want it to say.
So I found the story that they're referencing in this in this section of Plato's Republic, and it talks about how the story is of um, Cronus, or in Roman Saturn, overthrowing his father Uranus. So I wonder if like that's so sorry about that. I wonder if that is part of why I guess they're thinking of or discussing some sort of um, age centric censorship,
Mm,
as if. And here's the link in case you're interested. I apologize; it's kind of long, um, but
mm.
and pause if you want to note down this link. But
Or just do a Google
the
search yourself.
yeah, but yeah, the stories of how Cronus overthrew Uranus, and
Mm.
in the details that I found just in the quick detail or in the quick Google search, it is a little bit graphic. So I wonder if that's an aspect of why it was, you know, um, I
To be
guess
censored.
considered a little bit mature. Yeah,
Well,
or
I'm seeing
not for
it.
the
I'll
young
keep
ears.
Yeah, I'll keep reading these next paragraphs because I think they give more context, and it sounds like um, it might be more of a social issue, like not putting ideas into the youth that they should rebel, or that they can disrespect or kind of oppose authority or their fathers, or the society at large. So says, "Why, yes," said he, "those stories are extremely objectionable. Yes, Adeimantus, they are stories not to be repeated in our state. The young man should not be told that in committing the worst of crimes he is far from doing anything outrageous, and that even if he chastises his father when he does wrong, in whatever manner, he will only be following the example of the first and greatest among the gods." "I entirely agree with you," he said. "In my opinion, those stories are quite unfit to be repeated. Neither, if we mean our future guardians, to regard the habit of quarreling among themselves as of all things the basest, should any word be said to them of the wars in heaven, and of the plots and fightings of the gods against one another, for they are not true. No, we shall never mention the battles of the giants, or let them be embroidered on garments, and we shall be silent about the innumerable other quarrels of gods and heroes with their friends and relatives. If they would only believe us, we would tell them that quarreling is unholy, and that never up to this time has there been any quarrel between citizens. This is what old men and old women should begin by telling children, and when they grow up, the poets also should be told to compose for them in a similar spirit. But the narrative of Hephaestus binding here his mother, or how on another occasion Zeus sent him flying for taking her part when she was being beaten, and all the battles of the gods in Homer, these tales must not be admitted into our state, whether they are supposed to have an allegorical meaning or not. For a young person cannot judge what is allegorical and what is literal. Anything that he receives into his mind at that age is likely to become indelible and unalterable. And therefore it is most important that the tales which the young first hear should be models of virtuous thoughts. That is an interesting take. Because on the one hand, you don't want to give people ideas. You don't want to, specifically, you don't want to give the youth poor ideas or poor examples. So there are some ideas that, children should be shielded from. But it sounds like his take is don't let them hear about anything that done bad ever. It's like totally censor everything that we don't want them to do. And I think my take would be that you can have bad ideas essentially in stories so long as they are appropriately treated as bad ideas in the story, because then they can be teaching by a poor example, something not to emulate. I think a little earlier they said something that caught my eye. I don't know, but basically like something made me think of some of the more modern writing in a bunch of shows where there will be characters who have a lot of moral failings that aren't, supposed to be grown from. They're not opportunities for character development. They're just bad characters, and they have faults and weaknesses, but they aren't treated as faults and weaknesses. And I feel like that is sort of troubling to me, because then it's like you're telling people stories or showing them of things that are bad but not treated as bad, and things that would lead to poor outcomes but don't in the story. Then it's like not only giving people bad ideas but not warning them and maybe even promoting them, and that's when you really get in trouble.
Which, yeah, I think that last point that you brought up, that they sort of promote those bad ideas, is, I agree, when it becomes problematic because, and I wonder if they include those, as you call them, faults. Uh, I guess in terms of a trope that comes to mind, I think of the Mary Sue, and I wonder if the reason why they include those things is because they do view them as, I guess, in the words of these authors, a virtue, you know? And so I wonder if the authors themselves don't see those attributes, that most would consider to be problematic to be, a negative thing.
Yeah, I I think we would have different definitions or use the word or the term Mary Sue differently, but I do think that I do agree that some people put forward things in stories not realizing or not thinking themselves that they are bad, and that is I think part of the reason why. Yeah.
And like, so this series that we're reading, uh, or this book that we're reading comes from uh, what a group of authors titled the Great Conversation, and I wonder, I guess, what age group they are targeting, if they agree with this formulation, that of uh, teaching people or teaching young kids like how to live, I guess, because of um the people that they include in the conversation. Because they include people who I think would be pretty negative influences, even if they are, I guess, influential figures.
Hmm.
Marx, for example, like one of his, or Marx and Engels wrote the manifesto, the Communist Manifesto, and that is one of the books in this so-called conversation. And I find it uh, interesting, I guess, given this information, assuming they are adhering to this advice of only um, uh, providing negative voices once one has kind of, I guess, learned how to think critically. Uh,
Personally, I don't think they have really censored um, foolish or bad ideas from the Great Conversation, because it is part of the conversation of humanity, basically, that they're trying to present. And unfortunately, there isn't really an age limit on ignorance, stupidity, or foolishness. The Great Conversation is for people to explore and learn about significant ideas from throughout history. And those do take a certain amount of maturity and understanding to receive and to understand and to approach appropriately. But that's, I think, beyond an age issue. I mean, there's a lot of college students that I would not trust as much as, a mature teenager.
Mm,
There's a lot of people who are voting age that I would not trust to vote wisely.
yeah,
Which,
yes.
that's yeah.
Speaking of which, there's a series that I've been working on, uh, putting together behind the scenes, which I guess, informally titling uh, "Voting is a Skill," where we do bring up some of the less um, less mature or
Mhm.
less well thought out takes regarding pretty much anything that involves the specifically the lack of critical thinking.
Yeah. I should have mentioned that. Now we're getting even more off, off track. Yeah.
Um,
So, yeah, I think there's a lot of things that should be censored from certain audiences, but you can never guarantee that an audience is prepared for a certain topic, especially by something as like age. Age restrictions can only do so much because you can't guarantee a certain amount of wisdom by age, unfortunately, or knowledge, or well, you can't really guarantee much of anything by age. So it is a very limited um, criteria for censorship. But I do think it's important, to at least have a broad, even if it's rough around the edges, it's important to have some censorship, and age is a simple way to do that. Like, if
Yeah,
no one is going to be wise and mature enough to handle a certain kind of content below a certain age, then that's a good age, because you know it appropriately restricts people who it shouldn't, who shouldn't view it.
and another thing that I
Kind
would
of like,
note.
I was gonna say, it's like type 1 versus type 2 errors. Like, you
Hmm.
can't keep everyone who shouldn't see it from seeing it, but you can. Well, maybe that isn't exactly quite right, but you can do a lot of limiting without limiting people who should be able to see it. There are extremes that you can safely censor.
Just one last thing before we continue, and if you have any or something else to add, which it sounds like you might, uh, we can bring that up. But all I was just going to add was that this section just seems to be about like fictional or allegorical stories, um, or like metaphorical stories. So it seems like um, this conversation, or I guess this part of the conversation would only primarily apply um, to fiction, because uh, fiction is the only non, uh, or I guess conditionally non-literal of the, uh, I guess, writing styles, or, or something of that effect. You had something else to say, Caleb? Marco?
Whoops, sorry, my mic was off.
Oh,
Yeah, I was
thanks.
just gonna ask if we were ready to move on, so I think we are ready. I can pick up and read a little more.
Sure, if you would.
There you are right, he replied. But if any one asks, where are such models to be found, and of what tales are you speaking, how shall we answer him? I said to him, you and I, Adeimantus, at this moment are not poets, but founders of a state. Now the founders of a state ought to know the general forms in which poets should cast their tales, and the limits which must be observed by them, but to make the tales is not their business. Very true, he said. But what are these forms of theology which you mean? Something of this kind, I replied. God is always to be represented as he truly is, whatever be the sort of poetry, epic, lyric, or tragic in which the representation is given. Right? And is he not truly good? And must he not be represented as such? Certainly. And no good thing is hurtful? No, indeed. And that which is not hurtful hurts not? Certainly not. And that which hurts not does no evil? No. And can that which does no evil be a cause of evil? Impossible. And the good is advantageous? Yes. And therefore the cause of well-being? Yes. It follows, therefore, that the good is not the cause of all things, but of the good only. Assuredly. Then God, if he be good, is not the author of all things, as the many assert, but he is the cause of a few things only, and not of most things that occur to men. For few are the goods of human life, and many are the evils, and the good is to be attributed to God alone. Of the evils, the causes are to be sought elsewhere, and not in him. That appears to me to be most true, he said. Then we must not listen to Homer or to any other poet who is guilty of the folly of saying that two casks lie at the threshold of Zeus, full of lots, one of good, the other of evil lots, and that he to whom Zeus gives a mixture of the two sometimes meets with evil fortune, at other times with good. But that he to whom is given the cup of unmingled ill, him wild hunger drives o'er the beauteous earth. And again, Zeus, who is the dispenser of good and evil to us. And if any one asserts that the violation of oaths and treaties, which was really the work of Pandarus, was brought about by Athene and Zeus, or that the strife and contention of the gods was instigated by Themis and Zeus, he shall not have our approval. Neither will we allow our young men to hear the words of Aeschylus. Aeschylus. I looked up how to pronounce this and I don't remember. That, how's it?
I was just gonna say that that pronunciation sounds pretty dang good.
Aeschylus? Something like that. His words, that God plants guilt among men when he desires utterly to destroy a house. And if a poet writes the sufferings of Niobe, the subject of the tragedy in which these iambic verses occur, or of the house of Pelops, or of the Trojan War, or on any similar theme, either we must not permit him to say that these are the works of God, or if they are of God, he must devise some explanation of them such as we are seeking. He must say that God did what was just and right, and they were the better for being punished. But that those who are punished are miserable, and that God is the author of their misery, the poet is not to be permitted to say, though he may say that the wicked are miserable because they require to be punished, and are benefited by receiving punishment from God. But that God, being good, is the author of evil to anyone is to be strenuously denied, and not to be said, or sung, or heard, in verse or prose, by anyone, whether old or young, in any well-ordered commonwealth. Such a fiction is suicidal, ruinous, impious. I agree with you, he replied, and am ready to give my assent to the law. Let this, then, be one of our rules and principles concerning the gods, to which our poets and reciters will be expected to conform, that God is not the author of all things, but of good only. That will do, he said. And what do you think of a second principle? Shall I ask you whether God is a magician, and of a nature to appear insidiously now in one shape and now in another, sometimes himself changing and passing into many forms, sometimes deceiving us with the semblance of such transformations? Or is he one and the same, immutably fixed in his own proper image? I cannot answer you, he said, without more thought. Well, I said, if we suppose a change in anything, that change must be effected either by the thing itself or by some other thing. Most certainly. And things which are at their best are also least liable to be altered or discomposed. For example, when healthiest and strongest, the human frame is least liable to be affected by meats and drinks, and the plant which is in the fullest vigor also suffers least from winds or the heat of the sun or any similar causes. Of course. And will not the bravest and wisest soul be least confused or deranged by any external influence? True. And the same principle, as I should suppose, applies to all composite things, furniture, houses, garments. When good and well made, they are least altered by time and circumstances. Very true. Then everything which is good, whether made by art or nature or both, is least liable to suffer change from without. True. But surely God and things of God are in every way perfect? Of course they are. Then he can hardly be compelled by external influence to take many shapes. He cannot. But may he not change and transform himself? Clearly, he said, that must be the case if he is changed at all. And will he then change himself for the better and fairer, or for the worse and more unsightly? If he change at all, he can only change for the worse, for we cannot suppose him to be deficient either in virtue or beauty. Very well, Adeimantus, but then, would anyone, whether god or man, desire to make himself worse? Impossible. Then it is impossible that God should ever be willing to change, being, as is supposed, the fairest and best that is conceivable. Every god remains absolutely and forever in his own form. That necessarily follows, he said, in my judgment. Then, I said, my dear friend, let none of the poets tell us that The gods, taking the disguise of strangers from other lands, walk up and down cities in all sorts of forms. And let no one slander Proteus and Thetis, neither let anyone, either in tragedy or in any other kind of poetry, introduce here disguised in the likeness of a priestess asking an alms for the life-giving daughters of Inachus the river of Argos. Let us have no more lies of that sort, neither must we have mothers under the influence of the poets scaring their children with a bad version of these myths, telling how certain gods, as they say, go about by night in the likeness of so many strangers and in diverse forms. But let them take heed lest they make cowards of their children and at the same time speak blasphemy against the gods. Heaven forbid, he said. But although the gods are themselves unchangeable, still by witchcraft and deception they may make us think that they appear in various forms? Perhaps, he replied. Well, but can you imagine that God will be willing to lie, whether in word or deed, or to put forth a phantom of himself? I cannot say, he replied. Do you not know, I said, that the true lie, if such an expression may be allowed, is hated of gods and men? What do you mean? He said. I mean that no one is willingly deceived in that which is the truest and highest part of himself, or about the truest and highest matters. There, above all, he is most afraid of a lie having possession of him. Still, he said, I do not comprehend you. The reason is, I replied, that you attribute some profound meaning to my words, but I am only saying that deception, or being deceived or uninformed about the highest realities in the highest part of themselves, which is the soul, and in that part of them to have and to hold the lie, is what mankind least like. That, I say, is what they utterly detest. There is nothing more hateful to them. And as I was just now remarking, this ignorance of the soul, of him who is deceived, may be called the true lie. For the lie in words is only a kind of imitation and shadowy image of a previous affection of the soul, not pure unadulterated falsehood. Am I not right? Perfectly right. The true lie is hated not only by the gods, but also by men. Yes. Ooh, I'll stop there for a bit. I was kind of looking for a natural break point, but just kept going. So
Yeah, this is kind of getting into the metaphysics, which is above my pay grade.
So I guess now they're looking at a state in context, right? Because they're building the idea of a state. They kind of built it economically with the roles. Now they're saying there's certain things that should be censored. Even if the government doesn't make the stories, you have to, as a leader, you have to be aware of kind of the stories and censor them, at least for the youth. And that the first principle is that the gods should only be accurately portrayed, and that means perfectly good and basically unchanging, and that they are not deceptive. They don't lurk about. No telling kids scary stories to get them to behave. At least not about the gods. And I like how he's saying towards the end here that I guess people are most wary and cautious of accepting a lie about the most important things, or what he calls the highest realities. Yeah. It's like you have to be true in the soul. You have to be true about who you are, and I guess not lie to yourself about the most important things, or not even be lied to about the most important things. Yeah.
So, according to Google, the quote highest realities are the forms or the ideas, specifically the form of the good, which is the ultimate source of knowledge, truth, and being. These eternal, unchanging essences are more real than the physical world.
Interesting.
Which we could probably have an entire channel based on these concepts.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking back to a really good lecture video on like Platonism, Platonic philosophy, and one we should probably do a not response, a reaction video to or something. It was really good.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, I feel like this has, I think, pretty deep implications. This would be good to revisit.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess
do you want to
this
pick
is
up
more.
sorry,
Sorry.
go ahead.
And this is more of an offhand comment than anything, but I've been doing some research lately into, I guess, apologetics, specific or more specifically in like a religious sense, and a lot of these, I guess, ideas seem to be present in theological conversations, like specifically this, like I guess conversations around like the nature of God and stuff like that. That of like the greatest good, unchangeability, causes outside of him himself, which I don't entirely claim to understand. So I'll just leave it at that. But yeah. Sorry, where did we leave off? You asked me
That
to
was
continue reading.
whereas the lie.
Oh, I see. Whereas the lie in words is in causes and cases useful and not hateful in dealing with enemies. That would be an instance, or again, when those whom we call our friends, in a fit of madness or illusion, are going to do some harm. Then it is useful and in sort of a medicine or preventive, also in the tales of mythology, of which we are just now speaking. Because we do not know the truth about ancient times, we make falsehoods as much like truth as we can, and so turn it to account. Very true, he said. But can any of these reasons apply to God? Can we suppose that he is ignorant of antiquity and therefore has recourse to intervention? That would be ridiculous, he said. Then the lying poet has no place in our idea of God. I should say not. Or perhaps he may tell a lie because he's afraid of enemies. That is inconceivable. But he may have friends who are senseless or mad, but no mad or senseless person can be a friend of God. Then no motive can be imagined why God should lie. None whatever. Then the superhuman and divine is absolutely incapable of falsehood? Yes. Then it is God perfectly simple and true, both in word and deed. He changes not, he deceives not, either by sign or word, by dream or waking vision. Your thoughts, he said, are a reflection of my own. You agree with me then, I said, that this is the second type or form in which we should write and speak about divine things. The gods are not magicians who transform themselves, neither do they deceive mankind or in any way, which to that point, I would just like to bring up Exhibit A, Jupiter or Zeus. That man is the poster child of deceit.
Who's always transforming into something.
Uh huh. Which I find it hilarious that they're saying like we should always portray the gods or portray the gods in accurate ways, and a god would never be deceitful. But then we've got like Zeus, or I was gonna say Bacchus. What's his name? Dionysus, or Hera, which I think here, Here, is who this author's or who this translator is referring to as Hera, the wife of Zeus. But yeah, I just
Oh,
find that funny.
yeah. Yeah, the capitalized H threw me off.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, what? Is there supposed to be a period? Like, I'm so confused.
yeah. It was like 3 or 4 years in that I was like, hold on, is that Hera? But
Yeah. A lot of these names seem to be like slightly different Anglicizations or something,
yeah, yeah.
like little different spelling.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, he says, "You agree with me then," I said, "that this is the second type of form in which we should write or speak about divine things. The gods are not magicians who transform themselves. Zeus. Neither do they deceive mankind in any way. Zeus. I grant that." Oh, okay, here we go. Then, although we are admirers of Homer, we do not admire the lying dream which Zeus sends to Agamemnon. Neither will we praise the verses of I, Aish, Aeschylus, in which Thetis, who's like the right hand woman of Zeus, or like the messenger of Zeus, almost
Uh,
like uh, oh, what's his name, Hermes, says that Apollo at her nuptials was celebrating in song her fairy progeny, whose days were long, and to know no sickness. And when we're coming up on the end,
mhm.
oh, I lost my place. Darn it! And when he had said, spoken of my lot, as in all things, blessed in heaven, he raised a note of triumph and cheered my soul. And I thought that the words of Phoebus, being divine and full of prophecy, would not fail. And now he himself, who uttered the strain, he who is present at the banquet, and who said this, he it is who has slain my son. These are the kind of sentiments about the gods which will arouse anger, our anger, and he who utters them shall refuse a chorus, shall be refused a chorus. Neither shall we allow teachers to make use of them in the instruction of the young, meaning, as we do, that our guardians, as far as men can be, should be true worshippers of the gods like them. I entirely agree with you, he said, in these principles, and promise to make them my laws. Oh man.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting, even from the beginning of this discussion, like they're talking about the gods whose stories are bad examples to the children, like Kronos
Hmm.
and Uranus. Um, like,
And Zeus.
yeah, so it's interesting, like even even in the beginning throughout this whole discussion, they're kind of acknowledging the problematic nature of their gods in social roles, or as social examples, to influence the young, and yet they're still ascribing this sort of perfect idea of godhood that mismatches it. So that's interesting, yeah. Well, what do you say we do a quick overview, skim through the book, and kind of summarize it?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Let's.
Yeah. They do really just kind of pick up with a lot of the same stuff from book one, so it really blends together. But yeah, they're talking about, I guess, the three categories of goods, I think, like for their own their own benefit, their consequences, or both. Maybe not in that order. And then the idea that justice is done by law, not by will, like because people would naturally want to do injustice for their own benefit. That people would rather do injustice but not experience it. And so there's the law that you should not do that which is unjust. Then there's the story of the invisibility ring. Like realistically, anyone who has that ring is going to do evil, and anyone who doesn't do evil is going to be called a fool. Like you're going to be an idiot for not doing that. Like we have a certain propensity and even like alignment of injustice. Like we do not broadly absolutely condemn it.
And something interesting in that section, at least, was a discussion on, I guess, acting unjust but seeming just, and the reverse, acting just but seeming unjust, and like
Yeah.
the ramifications of such an occurrence.
Yeah, and it seems like the appearance of justice is really what is beneficial, not more so than just actually being just. Then there's the idea that from your sacrifices you could give gifts to the gods and things, and with all the advantage that you get from being unjust, you can kind of take care of yourself and avoid the consequences. You can have your friends and you can benefit your friends, harm your enemies. You can really secure your benefits and your comfort in life. So it certainly seems like the nice way to live. Yeah, we teach like the youth to be just. Yeah, it's like, oh, what people actually say versus what they think, and like most people would speak out against the wicked or the unjust as self-preservation. And we talked about really in what way is it self-preservation? Not so much like because that's what they actually believe and how they feel, especially if it was them doing the injustice.
And at this point, they are just beginning to, I guess, address the question that they were originally posing in the beginning, whether it's a good or a bad thing. Justice. I think you're muted there, Caleb.
Oh, just reading.
Oh, okay. For sure. You're just a little quiet, so I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
we didn't lose my co-host.
No, just trying to read quickly enough to summarize. Yeah. And then they get into the whole state and the state justice versus individual. They start at the basic, and based on their needs, you get more and more roles, more and more positions of people.
And importantly, they begin from the individual up to the state instead of the reverse,
Yeah,
focusing from the state to the individual level.
yeah. I think at the beginning they said they wanted to look at the state first. Or wait, which one did they say they wanted to look at first? Because they started the discussion with the people and they built it up to the state, but I think they said they wanted to look at the state justice first and then apply it to the individual, right?
Oh,
So yeah, first as they appear in the state, and secondly in the individual. So this was
okay.
all in prep to look at the state level of justice and injustice. So they build up, all the artisans and stuff, and the hirelings, and then they get into war, and they need more land for farming and for raising cattle, and then people need certain attributes.
And there's an emphasis on only producing what you're adept at. Like a shoemaker only focuses on making shoes.
Yeah. You only
Farmer,
focus on what you're good at, basically, and you have a I guess career, I don't know, an occupation based on what aligns with you, and then you focus on that only. And not really any multiple things, like it's really specialized. So you can't even have like troops, like Minutemen, I guess wouldn't be a thing. Like you can't even have troops be a secondary role. Like you have to have troops be their own thing to pursue. You have to have the right aptitude for troops to be violent towards their enemies and civilized with their own people, and
and these couple
full.
lines, I think, summarize well what we're talking about. Uh,
Yeah,
a better quality when one man does one thing which is natural to him and does it at the right time and leaves other things,
yeah,
like the husbandman who plows and takes after agriculture, the weaver and the shoemaker, the builder. And you bring up an interesting point about like Minutemen, like you were saying, um, that I guess civilian soldiers wouldn't necessarily be a thing unless
mhm,
soldiering was their entire profession.
yeah. Mm. So it
Oh,
seems like in their view, you do only really embrace one like skill or one, but I guess like, well, you can only embrace one skill, but you can kind of have different qualities relative to like your behavior. So you might have like maybe a quality or like a disposition to be aggressive or violent or something. But then later on, when it starts talking about the soldiers and things, and like, well, animals and dogs, they can be friendly with one person and aggressive with another. So in that sense, there can be conflicting qualities, which I would maybe say behaviors more, but I think they use a word closer to qualities, or trait, they say.
mm.
So you have to have the traits that you need for the job, different natures, gifted with opposing qualities. The love of
They
learning and
expand,
wisdom is, yeah.
and then they like expand to trade and things like that.
Yeah. So I kind of brushed over that part.
Hmm.
Yeah, they expand to trade. Then they need more land, and they get into the warring, and that's when they bring up the soldiers. And we talked about how land can't just be like traded like a commodity or a service, because it's more fundamental to the security of the state. Like, it's not so easy to be traded around, and so you have to, at least that's my, I guess, inference of maybe like an implicit assumption is, you can't trade land as much, because they just immediately jump to war as soon as they need more land. Yeah. The dog, he's a true philosopher.
Were you
And then
looking
they
at my
get
screen?
into, yeah.
That's funny.
Yep. And then we start getting towards the part that we read today with education, what they call music. I'm curious to maybe see more of the etymology of that and where that translation came from. But music, including literature, including nonfiction and fiction, and
Mhm.
then gymnastic for the body, which maybe that would translate to like physical health in general, and maybe not just like exercise, but maybe they would also consider diet, medicine, anatomy. Like, maybe that's all included in gymnastic in their
I would say
wording, in their
I would say
language.
necessarily so.
Yeah. And then we start getting into all the ideas that you would want to have censored from children by state mandate. And that's all that we read today. That God should be truly depicted as good and unchanging and undeceiving, etc.
Good old Zeus.
Yep.
Oh, funny Zeus.
Cool. Any final thoughts while we wrap up, Bryce?
Um, Not particularly, no. But I think we're finally getting into, I guess, newer territory, or I guess addressing the things that I find interesting. So
Mm,
it'll be fun to get into book 4 next
yeah.
next time.
Or 3.
Oh yeah, yes, that's right. I see. Book 3. This is rhyme, so it
Sweet.
must be true.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. This was fun to wrap up. Sounds like we're still in the middle of the super discussion quite a bit. It looks like book 1 and 2 and 3 will all chain together pretty continuously. Looking forward to doing more reading. Thanks for joining us.
All right, we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for joining us through today's exploration. If this resonated with you, please subscribe, like the video, and hit the bell so you never miss an episode. Check the description and pinned comment for extra resources. Thanks again for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.